Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to week number 3. I think you've perhaps enjoyed the necklace. I've seen some sort of really enthusiastic replies and responses and posts, and so I'm really happy to have jumped into our first short story and have sort of received such a great response, really thoughtful ideas. You're looking up definitions, you're responding to each other. Everyone's doing sort of really spectacularly in this third week, and I'm really excited to be working with you on our next short story in Unit 3, which is Flannery O'Connor. Before we go into the sort of objectives for this week, I wanted to just give you some highlights from last week on the necklace. So thank you again to those of you who, Alexandria and Tria, who provided us, I hope you've noticed, we have a new banner, and I will be alternating Alexandria's and Tria's banner of all of our sort of images, just so that you can see sort of a sense of community here in our online course. So thank you to your contributions to our Google slide deck. It's looking a little bit different here, but thank you for all of those definitions that attended to plot and point of view, narrative structure and point of view. And so we began with thinking about what exposition is, basically information that has sort of the background as we're discussing the story. We learned what a protagonist was. Thank you for that. The denouement, or the unraveling of the story in the necklace. And here's a quote, "Oh, by poor Mathilde, why my necklace was paste. It was worth at most 500 francs." So we find in the story that the diamond necklace that Mathilde has spent 10 years working to pay off was indeed just sort of a fake jewelry, just costume jewelry. The conclusion, what does the conclusion look like in this instance? Thank you for this quotation here. What does plot consist of? What is the narrative hook? And I think the sort of first sentence, especially in a short story, really resonates. She was one of those pretty and charming girls who are sometimes, as if by a mistake of destiny, born in a family of clerks. Sort of classic Guy de Maupassant here. And then Tria, here you're including what rising action was in the story here, as well as, I think, concluding remarks. And Joe, critical moment. What is the critical moment in the short story? And there's a few of those, but I think you picked out one of the most important here. I've included a few comments on some of your slides too, if you want to go back and look at those. I've included comments on throughout our Google Doc. Again, very ecstatic about sort of the dynamic and the sort of discussion happening here. A few notes, a few moments that I was really excited about. Again, you're doing great, including your responses here. We had this a really interesting kind of interpretations here. I like that you guys were including some links to songs, and a few of you have done that. So Tim, you had the song about Donna the prima donna. All very different eras here too. So we had RJ thinking about this quote from the story: "She danced with intoxication, with passion, made drunk by pleasure, forgetting all." That was sort of interpreting how Mathilde was feeling at this this event. And so here's sort of the sonic environment that this reminded you of. So fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. And then also, Alexandria, some lyrics from the Eagles, thinking about fidelity, thinking about how money and appearance will adversely affect our relationships. So thanks for including those. I was really excited to see, and really across all of you, thinking about how this short story, written in the 19th century by a French writer, again, this is a translation that we're reading, is so sort of relevant to our current moment. And you did a really great job of making that connection between what we're reading in class and sort of our real experience, our real lived lives. And you did that really well in your discussion board posts and the images you've included in the responses to those 3 questions, or one of those questions. Here's also an image that I think Alexandria you linked, and this is sort of an image from the sort of live action of Cinderella, which I haven't seen, but sort of reflects, well, I think that sort of stereotypical, that image that everyone wants to sort of aspire to be, especially in sort of these fairy tale situations. And Shreya, thank you for this insight on that quotation from her story that mentioned that Mathilde could have elected to wear flowers, but instead she said, no, I want something even more spectacular. I need something that's really flashy. Give me the diamonds. And so thank you for this insight into traditional Indian garland and what goes into that sort of decoration for these events. So again, thank you very much for the contributions to Unit 2, both to this collaborative reading activity and also to these portfolios that you're building out with images that you've taken for yourself. I also thank you for responding to our initial that survey. I think most of you've done it. I think there were 6 responses. So under units, just this early term student feedback, just getting some responses in terms of how you're getting into the course, how things are making sense to you, and if I can improve in any way. So hopefully we have figured out, I know some of that sort of terms and concepts Google book didn't allow you to view all of the pages, and so I've been actually incorporating those using my snipping tool. So you'll see that you can just see these pages. I'll just sort of copy them for each of the subsequent units. Also take note that if you enjoyed this story, I'm including some related reading. So for last week, if you wanted to read this Henry James interpretation that responded to Guy de Maupassant's story by writing Paste, again, a reference to the necklace, feel free to read through that and have fun sort of if you have some additional time and want to get farther into sort of the Guy de Maupassant circle, that would be a sort of recommended reading for you. In this week, we're going to be working on reading Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. And so specifically, we'll be thinking about character and setting. And I have prefaced this unit with an image. Actually, Flannery O'Connor was a cartoonist. And so I think something that we'll notice in her stories, and I'll talk about this in a few minutes, is sort of the accentuation of character, of situation, and how none of her short stories are actually supposed to reflect real life in their exact detail, but are more or less parables. And Joyce Carol Oates has a great essay that discusses the ways in which Flannery O'Connor is sort of writing as parable, and what does that mean? So here's a cartoon I began with, and she wrote, I don't enjoy looking at these old pictures either, but it doesn't hurt my reputation for people to think I'm a lover of fine arts. And so kind of a comic interpretation of why is, what is art and how is she interpreting or beginning art. So Flannery O'Connor, writing a little bit later than Guy de Maupassant, 1925 she was born. She dies when she's only 39 in 1964 of lupus. So she has some medical conditions, and one of the things that characterizes her short story writing is the fact that she's a devout Roman Catholic. She was uncompromising in her religious views. She writes, for I am no disbeliever in spiritual purpose and no vague believer. This means that for me the meaning of life is centered in our redemption by Christ, and what I see in the world I see in relationship to that. As Joyce Carol Oates recognized in her essay, The Visionary Art of Flannery O'Connor, she's one of the greatest religious writers of modern times, unique, quote, in her celebration of the necessity of succumbing to the divine through violence that is immediate and irreparable. There is no mysticism in her work that is only spiritual. It is physical as well, end quote. O'Connor's stories, like the 3 included, I've included here in the site, frequently involve family relationships, but they are not meant to be read as realistic fiction, as I mentioned, despite her remarkable ear for dialogue. O'Connor said she wrote them as parables, as the epigraph to A Good Man is Hard to Find attests. In the epithet to Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find, something published in 1953, she writes, the dragon is by the side of the road, watching those who pass. Beware lest he devour you. We go to the Father of souls, but it is necessary to pass by the dragon. And so what does that mean for us reading today, and for what we're to understand this sort of parable in her writing? O'Connor expands on this idea by discussing that the quote here is the primary concern for stories of any depth. Depth being significance, philosophical or otherwise. She's also specifically mentioning that the dragon may come in many forms. This would imply that there are many moral challenges which face individuals, and that we as readers need to be able to listen to these stories both of success and failure. As she states, it is also a journey, quote, into his jaws, end quote, which may be worth exploring. In setting this epithet before a good man is hard to find, O'Connor is telling the reader to prepare for one such journey. Ultimately, in recognizing this particular brand of morality, we are able to come away from the story with the understanding that while our moments of goodness may be fleeting and often too late, they are always worth doing, and they are worth doing all the time. So this, you'll be sort of surprised by some of the things that happen in the story, but hold tight. This is sort of part of the story. This is sort of a really a sort of phenomenal part of her writing. Flannery O'Connor uses this real physical aside this sort of spiritual in her parables of human folly confronted by mortality. She would have been a good woman, the murderous misfit says in the short story, if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. And so, again, read this short story with a particular framework in mind. We're thinking about Flannery O'Connor as writing from a Georgia perspective, the deep South she's writing in. She herself is from Georgia, was sort of raised in the South, and has this sense that, as this sort of really interesting sense of charactering certain people, specifically these personalities that sort of mock human fatuousness or frailty, and that really creates these strong presences, these strong characters that you'll see in sort of the characters of the misfit and also the grandma. So for this week, please read through the short story. I'm really excited to hear some of your responses, especially with regard to listening to how she's reading the short story to you. So here's the recording of Flannery O'Connor, and I ask that you just listen to her and read along with her, and make one comment that sort of reflects on her pronunciation, her discussion, her diction, her emphasis or lack of emphasis as she's reading through her own short story. And two other comments that may include any kinds of reactions other than that. So it could involve your initial reactions, responses. It can include a definition or highlight aspects of character and setting. So please do that in the short story in this section. There's also, I've linked two other short stories if you feel inclined and are sort of enjoying Flannery O'Connor's sense of humor, of violence, of morality, spirituality. Also, please look at sort of definitions of character and setting and what's incorporated in those elements of our short story writing, and contribute to the slide deck one image of either a character or setting from the short story that seems fitting to this short story. And remember that this doesn't actually have to be something, this image doesn't have to be something that's period specific, like from the 1950s, but actually can be, and you've done so well before, can importantly be from an image of someone or something happening in our own contemporary moment, i.e. the setting and character need not be period specific, and then include a quotation from the short story to support the image that you include in the slide deck that refers to setting or atmosphere. The last piece of information, the last sort of assignment I'm excited and I hope you are excited to try out, is to record yourself reading a short passage from the short story, just as Flannery O'Connor has. And you can do it using Vocaroo, which is a free application. You don't even need to sign up for it. It's just completely online. You just click on this link here and it'll open up the tool, and you can just begin simply recording your reading. And so what I'm asking you to do is to pick out a paragraph or two, to save your recording and upload it, create a new page titled Unit 3, Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find, upload your recording, include along with your recording a copy of and pasted excerpt from the short story just to follow along with, and a corresponding typed explanation about why you chose to record the passage you selected. And you can feel free to be creative with this recording, sort of bonus points for adding in sound effects and or music to accompany your reading. You might use this recording to interpret or emphasize a section of the story for a different and updated context. So publish that by Wednesday, and then by Friday just